what really matters is gaining from the experience of your past lives and using it in this one. And you could do that without necessarily even believing in reincarnation. You could draw on your subconscious mind where the memories are stored without knowing really why you know this. I mean, I'm going to say that probably everybody watching this right now will have some things that they've come across in this life which are really familiar to them. You can meet a person. You haven't really even started talking to them and you just kind of know them.
Right, yeah.
So I think some people will resonate with that.
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
Richard, hi.
Darren, hi there.
Good. So today, interesting topic, very familiar one, I think, to a lot of people, past lives.
Oh, yes.
But I think quite an interesting angle that this person has come up with. So I wanted to bring it up here today, chat to you about it. So they say, assuming reincarnation is real, then how would one remember aspects and memories of our past lives so that we may be able to use that previous knowledge to guide us in a better direction than before? Basically, how can I learn from my previous life's mistakes? And I guess, finally, is it advisable even for us to try to remember aspects of our past lives in the first place? So I think there's
lots of questions there.
A lot of questions, but I think quite a balanced question, actually.
I think so. Very good question indeed. I mean, one thing you don't want to do is get it wrong. In other words, think you were someone you weren't. And that's very commonly done by people who claim to remember their past lives. Let me just say straight away, I do remember certain past lives. There's some I believe in, but I can't say I know them to be true. There's one in particular that I sort of remember details of it, physical things from it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay. So it can happen. It's not essential. I don't believe at all. It can be helpful. But what is very unhelpful, which is commonly done, because most people, I mean, it's the ego of human beings, I suppose, is to think, if, you know, I remember kind of the Elizabethan period, so I was Elizabeth, or I was the Duke of so-and-so, or whatever.
The most notable person
someone I've heard from in history. You might have been, you know, the butler, you might have been, you know, a baker, whatever. And so there is a tendency to do that. And then once you do that, it's a bit like thinking you're a medium when you aren't. You can start to sort of elaborate from it and you could actually go wrong. So there's a bit of a warning. I think it comes back to something we've said before. Nothing wrong in those 3 words, I don't know. And actually, you don't need to know. There's a very good reason why people can't, well, there's a couple of reasons why most people can't remember past lives. One is advancement. It does take a certain, you know, level of advancement. I'm not saying everyone who remembers past lives, though, is highly advanced. And there are highly advanced people, or fairly advanced people, who may not remember past lives. So it's not a sort of yardstick, but that's one element. But the big element also is a very uncomfortable thing. You know, it's not all good because
being aware of who you were and remembering
it is if you're honest about it.
I see.
Because, you know, we all made mistakes. And there can be barriers against saying, I can't have been that person. Because, you know, you wouldn't behave like that now. But things were very different in the past. So that's something that a master from this earth, very advanced master who spoke through Dr. King prior to the command, actually, and since, before he was contacted by extraterrestrials and since, called the Master Chang Fu, who was located in Tibet. He was very explicit. He was asked that question, and he said, well, he put it in his own words, these aren't his words, that, you know, it's not very pleasant to realize some of the things we've done in the past, and that's one reason why it gets locked up in our memory banks. It's difficult to deal with. So you've got to be able to deal with it. You've got to be able to, I mean, it won't necessarily be, if you're known at all, and it doesn't matter whether you're known, because fame isn't a yardstick of merit necessarily, but, you know, even a period of history can be, through our eyes, very primitive, and you can't go by the history books completely. I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but the one thing that Dr. King says he wasn't very good at school was history. And I mean, that's because he didn't really believe it.
That it could be true. That
this could have been going on when he was a child, and of course, coming from where he came from, not this world. it must have been extremely alien to him. But the history books aren't reliable records any more than the newspapers always are.
Right.
So today, they can report something that happened yesterday wrongly, never mind 800 years ago.
Right.
So you have to get to the truth of it and then not think, oh, well, I think I was that person. Look at some history books and think, oh, well, that's what. Then you can start going down the wrong alley, even if you're right.
Totally.
So it's got to be down to memory. But what really matters is gaining, and this is where the question is spot on, actually, gaining from the experience of your past lives and using it in this one. And you could do that without necessarily even believing in reincarnation.
I see.
Because you could draw on your subconscious mind, where the memories are stored, without knowing really why you know this. I mean, I'm going to say that probably everybody watching this right now, and please write into us and tell me if I'm right, tell me if I'm wrong, will have some things that they've come across in this life which are really familiar to them, that they understand without it being really taught to them. There are extreme examples, actually, where people have been born with the ability to speak a foreign language that they haven't been taught, and even that their parents didn't know. I couldn't bring those cases forward. I haven't investigated them myself, but people say that there are cases like that. But you don't even have to be that specific. There's something you just have an aptitude for. Let's take an example. It might be something like cooking, and you just know what goes with what, and you haven't been taught it.
Yeah.
It might be, I remember playing a piece of music on the piano when I was about 14 or 15, and my father knew it. It was from his War Days by Glenn Miller, but I'd never heard it.
Wow.
And I was just playing it. And I wasn't Glenn Miller. Or in his band or anything, but maybe I'd heard it somewhere even before being born on another realm. Who knows? Somewhere it's there. Now that you could have people who they go to a country, they kind of know that. My professor at university, at Hull University, professor of drama, he said he went to Calcutta and he knew the old Calcutta. He knew what, if he walked round that corner, what he was likely to see. He became a Buddhist later. So there are all kinds of things like that. And you can meet a person. You haven't really even started talking to them, and you just kind of know them.
Right. Yeah.
So I think some people will resonate with that. Now that can be, not going to be dogmatic here, but can very often be a past life memory at a subconscious level.
Yeah, it's interesting because, number one, even if you don't believe in past lives, or even if you don't really remember a past life, that sort of familiarity could still be there with no other real explanation. That's interesting. But I think a couple of the questions came out of what you say there, one of which is, some people would say, well, wouldn't it be more useful if we could remember some things, and the lessons that we may have had to face in the past, so that, we can better, handle that same sort of situation in this life?
Yes, it's the same. It is true. Yes is the answer, providing you're ready to do so.
I see. Yeah.
And that's the question. And that will happen. It's a bit like the question: wouldn't it be a good thing if aliens landed among us and came out and did prove themselves? Yes, if the world reacted in the right way, definitely it would be a good thing. Yeah. But will they? I'm sorry to say they wouldn't right now. We know that from the way they react to just plain straightforward sightings.
Yeah.
So it's all about the readiness of the individual. But yes, I think as people progress, and depending what line you go down of evolution and advancement, if you'd have to focus on it, and it's just going to happen. I mean, some things can just happen, but if you really want to get to the bottom of it, but the key thing then, you'd have to be really honest about the lessons of that life. And I think they would come to you when you needed to deal with the karma of that life and the lessons in this life. Very often, if you did something in a particular way, and even within this life, actually, you don't even need reincarnation, if you reacted in a certain way, and the same lesson comes back to you, which you can do almost identically, you very often need to do the opposite.
Of how you
because you didn't, it's come back, so there's something else.
Yes.
Now, you might have been wrong the first time, or you might have been actually right, it might have been necessary for you to do that last time, but the whole totality of that experience, I think the master etherists in a transmission in the early days called it a process of sensitization through these experiences, and they can recur until you've drawn every ounce of learning you need from that karmic lesson.
It's actually such a perfect process, when you stand back to think about it, and how it actually works to refine you and the wisdom that you have as an individual, isn't it?
But, we wouldn't have racism, though, at all, if people accepted reincarnation. Yeah. We wouldn't have religious bigotry either, because people would have been all the major religions, at least.
Yeah, perhaps not even war or anything else where you could see that.
War is as absurd, as we think we know.
as we talked about. There's one other thing here, which is a point you had made earlier, which is about the usefulness of remembering some of these things in the context of your current life. I mean, the point you were just making there is sort of you'll remember it when it's the right time, and you can kind of accept that and handle it and apply it in your current situation. Yeah. I just wondered, how might you be living your life such that these things might come to the fore and be useful to you, these past life memories or lessons or awareness? Well,
there's a couple of ways, but just before I go to that, I would like to say, going back to your question before, that there's also a risk in everybody remembering their past lives, in them starting to dwell in their past lives.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
They might have had a life where they were much more, inverted commas, distinguished. In materialistic world, they might have been a famous person, for what that's worth, or they might have even done something of considerable note, and now they're not particularly. They think, and so they try to live that life and dwell on. I have seen people who believe, they might be right, I haven't looked into it, that they were a king in a former life, and then they become obsessed by that king. Where that king was buried, everything about them, and that's more important to them than what they're doing now. So that's another danger.
I see.
In it. But coming to your main point, though, about what can one learn? I think that's what you were saying, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, how might it be useful to us?
How might it be useful? Yeah. I mean, it can give you confidence. Is one way it could be useful, because if you know, and you're right, that you were able to achieve certain things in a past life, can give you a boost of confidence to achieve things in this life. Yeah. If you knew that you were an outstanding, this would be an extreme example, very accomplished person in a certain field, you could apply that, not necessarily in the same field, probably not in the same field, as a matter of fact, but who's to say, but you're capable of that in whatever your endeavor is now. Yeah. So that's a plus. And then on the other side, if you like, it's not a negative thing, but it's a negative factor, in a way, is that you could see what not to do. You could learn, about your failings, and you could think, okay. And I'll tell you one great thing actually about it. You can kind of understand why things are happening to you.
Yes.
Because I think one of the worst things, and you've got to tie in karma with reincarnation. It doesn't work otherwise. They come together. And you're going through some, let's say, terrible illness or real difficulty, or you seem to be extremely unlucky in your relationships on the face of it, and it seems unfair. If you can accept karma, you're halfway there at least. If you take in reincarnation, you can think, and particularly if you're able to remember it, if you were able to remember it, and as I want to stress, you don't have to, because you could still do it just by accepting karma alone. You could have a vague idea, without knowing who you are or where you lived, that let's say I maltreated people in a former life. I left my family unlooked after, and that's why this has happened to me now, whatever it is. That will actually strengthen you and give you think, okay, at least there's a reason for it. We've talked about this before. There's a reason I'm going through this. And the more you know about it, as long as it's true, the more useful that can be in sort of strengthening you and giving you resolve and helping you to understand why this lesson has come to you, which on the face of it seems really unfair and unlucky.
Yeah. You mentioned there the relationship between karma and reincarnation. I thought we could talk about that briefly. Yeah. How they interact and why one is kind of a logical consequence of the other.
Well, one thing I would say, coming just for a moment to the 9 freedoms, which go beyond even evolution on this earth, that this process we have on earth of reincarnation, and reincarnation back to this realm is a unique one in this solar system. And it's unique because of our lack of evolution. They don't need to do that on Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, the other planets of the solar system, because they don't need that karmic lesson. It comes back to the fact we've lost contact to a degree with our highest self.
I see.
So we come back to this realm, and this realm that we're on, I'm coming to your point, but this realm is an absolute hodgepodge of different people. As we know, you have Hitler and Gandhi in the same century that's living at the same time. You have very good, very bad, and lots of in-betweens. And so, we're here evolving as we're evolving. And so karma works for us through that system. There'll come a day on this earth when it won't. It's not the natural, or let's say it's not the perfect order of things.
Okay.
The perfect order of things would be that we were fully aware of other realms and this realm at the same time. But we're just not able to do that, evolution-wise. So we have to go through this process, and we have to learn our karma through this process, and we have to go through childhood and so on. I mean, the goal, of course, is to get to the sixth freedom of ascension, and that's when the reincarnation cycle comes to an end. I don't think I answered your question there at all, but I thought I'd throw that in.
But that is a really interesting point to see that actually this is just a consequence of our stage of evolution, that we have to go through childhood, that we forget, that we can't remember our previous
This isn't
lives.
if we don't, we don't have to see that as the natural order of things.
I see,
And from it come a lot of illusions. I mean, we've talked about this before, such as, parents thinking that they created their children, that, one way they did, but that without them, those children wouldn't exist. Now, that's not universal. There are many Buddhists, Hindus, and others who don't think that. But these are souls. In a sense, everyone's adopted. In one sense. But it's done through the process that we've been given, because it's the only process we're capable of using at the moment for rebirth, and in order to gain these essential karmic lessons.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because we're told in the teachings that actually before we're born, there is some sort of like plan and decisions that are made about the circumstances of our birth, and
Indeed.
The challenges or the lessons that we will, experiences that we will have in the life ahead of us. I think that's that's an interesting thing coming back here, because it's like, okay, maybe, and going back to your point about either giving you confidence or helping you to accept the lessons and experiences we have in this life, to know that we were part of choosing these experiences for our best growth, for our so that we could get exactly the lessons that we need in order to continue our journey towards wisdom and in our evolution.
Indeed. I mean, one issue that's really topical in the news and in politics at the moment is the issue of reparation.
Oh yeah.
And you can see why. For slavery or for some other maltreatment of other people. Of course, I'm not entering that political debate, but what it's missing is reincarnation, because the very people who might be paying off that debt, if you did a reparation, could be the very people that were abused. Not the people who are responsible. The people who
I see the other way around.
They're paying off for something that they suffered from. So reincarnation just changed perspective on every issue.
I see that. So coming back to karma and reincarnation for a moment there, about how do these relate to each other in the sense of, why is reincarnation a natural consequence of karma? I mean,
Well, reincarnation is a natural. Karma's the big thing.
Right.
I mean, the karma is God.
Right.
Karma is Brahma. Karma is the absolute. It's a manifestation of the absolute, shall we say? It's the perfect law which exists well beyond this earth. And that's the big difference between karma and reincarnation. As I mentioned earlier, reincarnation does not take place in that way. They might get a new body for a particular purpose, but they don't do it through procreation. And they don't do it through, they do it through the flame of the logos of the planet upon which they exist, which will happen here on Earth in the future. So that's karma. Reincarnation, on the other hand, is a product of our involution. We're at the stage we're at, and it's the only way that we can now gain experience, because we've chosen at some point to go down that route And, one can go into all the ins and outs of why we now need to procreate in order to maintain the race. But that isn't the perfect way to do it. So, but because we're in that situation, I would put it down very simply as a product of free will in the beginning. And that's the root of it's an absurd story in one way, the Adam and Eve story, and it's a sexist story, which is wrong. That aspect of it is completely wrong. But behind it is this choice of free will, which led to procreation, among other things. Yeah. And now we're in that, and we have to evolve through that to get back to the pure state we should have been in. Yeah. So I wouldn't quite equate karma and reincarnation in that regard. But I would say that, karma now for us works through the process of reincarnation. We choose our body, our next incarnation is chosen by our soul. It's not actually chosen by our spirit. Okay. Our spirit is the unmanifested spark, which we need to ignite, or we need God to ignite within us so that we can evolve. Love it. And transmute karma.
Yeah, it's a beautiful vision. The one other aspect that comes to me is that if we accept karma and the way that it works and the way that it gives us these essential lessons, and certainly that we are creating karma even in our present life at the moment, it could only be true that we're not going to work all of that karma out in this present life. Being reborn and going through the process of reincarnation is just the way that we have the opportunity to continue to resolve these lessons, right?
And actually there was a very early transmission. It's so early that it's in a book called You Are Responsible, but it was delivered by the Master Aetherius and the title of it given to it was Religious Reorientation and the importance of reintroducing reincarnation. And I say this with with empathy. But the leading, I'm going to not say who it is, but in fact, although this person has admitted it themselves, or not admitted it, they've announced it, a very leading church figure in this country suffers from depression, is on antidepressants, it gets annoyed with God, because everything seems, I suppose, why do you allow this war? Why do you allow the other? And I only mention that because it's a big limitation in Orthodox churches not to have this teaching. What the teaching of reincarnation gives you, even in the most extreme of cases, is when you take into account that this life is a jot in the ocean, really. It's just a tiny little pinprick of light in the panoply of illumination. That there are ghastly things. I can't explain them, and I certainly wouldn't want to judge them in any way at all, that happen to people. But after hundreds of thousands of years of living on this planet, for some reason through reincarnation, it's determined that by their own soul, that this is an essential experience. And another real mistake that people made, and actually an English football manager made this mistake, is to look at people and think, okay, that person, I think they even said that, is disabled, that person's suffering from this, therefore they weren't very good in their last life. That's really missing the whole point. Yes, everyone has lessons to learn, but you could have a super fit, very wealthy person who's much further away from enlightenment than someone who's in poverty and suffering in various ways, because that soul, the one who's suffering, who's in poverty, who's perhaps got an ailment or whatever it is choosing then to burn up their karma, to take their karma, to learn that lesson, because the soul, think they're now ready to learn this lesson. So you can't really judge it. It shouldn't be judged in a materialistic way. It's about the evolution of the soul in its journey to enlightenment.
Yeah, that puts a very different color on it, isn't it? Because we start to see everything through the necessary experience that each soul needs, and is able to take on at that time in their journey. Which, on its face, it's very difficult for us to judge. I think there's another point there about okay, these are essential experiences that our soul has chosen to go through, but it doesn't mean also that we shouldn't help people through whatever experience that they're going through. And I think that's an important lesson as well.
Absolutely, and that's a big mistake that was made at one time in the Hindu religion, you know, that, oh, well, we won't help them because that's their karma and that's what they need. No, we should help as far as we possibly can. That's all that's their karma then if we help
as well,
them.
yes.
And if we don't, we might be failing them. We would be failing them. So we're not the judge and jury here.
Yeah.
They are the judge of themselves. And I am the judge of myself, and it's done at the soul level.
Right.
And after we die, it's determined not only who our parents will be, but a whole sort of, you know, I'm going to say panoply again because I can't think of another word, but, you know, group of experiences that are required by us in order to evolve and advance, and in some cases perform the mission for which we were born in this life.
Beautiful way to end. Thank you very much.
Everybody, it's Darren here. Thanks for tuning into the show.
Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the 9 Freedoms. If you'd like to find out more about the 9 Freedoms, about Mars Sector 6 by Dr. George King, go to our website, that's aetherius.org. Richard and I love hearing from you, receiving your comments, your questions on your spiritual experiences, and talking about them on the show. So do write to us, share them with us at spiritualfreedom@richardlawrence.co.uk. Always remember that service is the jewel in the rock of attainment. See you next time.